Deathloop is a relatively new game by Dishonored and Prey developer Arcane Studios. As a big time fan of the Dishonored games, I was hyped for this game since it was first unveiled during a state of play and it was my primary reason for getting a PS5 early. I definitely went into this game with high expectations, and if I'm being honest, a lot of them weren't met. But I'm happy to admit that this isn't so much the game's fault as it is my own. I thought it was going to be one thing, but it was trying to be another. And while it's certainly not a perfect game, even when you view it as an independent new IP, it's great in its own right. In this video, I'll try to answer the question: has Deathloop earned its place on the Game of the Year lists of many reviewers, or is it just a mediocre experience undeserving of that praise? I'll try to segregate this video into three main parts: a spoiler free review, a relatively spoiler free gameplay overview, and a spoiler filled story analysis. But since the gameplay and the story complement each other greatly in this game, I would warn you to stop after watching the first section and come back later after you have played the game to hear my thoughts on the gameplay and the story as a whole. Alright, so like I mentioned, I love Arcane's older games. For those of you not familiar with Dishonored, it's an immersive sim with a focus on stealth. There's a variety of paths that you can employ, and while stealth is the preferred option, straight up combat is also highly viable. The game presents you with a plethora of options to take on each of its levels with seemingly endless possibilities when it comes to taking out your targets. There's also a chaos or morality system that significantly changes the game world and the ending depending on how you approach levels. Seemingly endless possibilities when it comes to taking out your targets. There's also a chaos or morality system that significantly changes the game world and the ending depending on how you approach levels, a la sneaky pacifist or as a loud murder machine. The Dishonored games reward experimentation and even have a quick save, quick load mechanic in place to aid you in said experimentation. The reason why I'm talking extensively about the Dishonored games is because I went into Deathloop expecting it to present me with the same options that the Dishonored games did. I was severely disappointed to find out that this was not the case. Well, not exactly. See, while the game has only one correct way to end the loop and finish all targets in one day, how you take them on individually will vary greatly depending on your preferred playstyle. There's also a gargantuan amount of weapons, perks, and powers for you to experiment with. So, although I'm deeply disappointed that the game does not give you the same player autonomy that the Dishonored games do, which actually makes Deathloop feel less rewarding, it presents options in a different way and ends up being pretty satisfying. The story of the game is also really interesting and requires effort on the player's part to unveil and understand. And while it stumbles at some points, overall it had me intrigued for the admittedly relatively short playtime of the game. I truly hope that there's some sort of DLC at some point to tie up the dangling loose ends though. The game's art style looks gorgeous to me, but that's a very subjective measure. I'll just say that the game looks phenomenal with ray tracing, but the 60 FPS performance mode was my go to. If you're on the fence about buying it, I'd recommend that you go ahead and purchase it. Just temper your expectations if you're an Arcane fan and look forward to a more linear experience than what you might be used to. To sum up my thoughts, I'll just say that it felt like I was being told a really competent and stylish whodunit style story, but it really felt like I was an active player who was piecing it all together. This will make more sense as we go on with the review. Okay, so this is the end of the spoiler free review. Get the game, play it, do it now. I'll wait. Oh, you're back already? Okay, that was quick. Okay, let's get on with the rest of my thoughts. I mentioned that the gameplay is tied into the story of this game, and I appreciate that to such an extent that I want to begin this section just talking about the central linkage. The fact that the game gives you an explanation for why you're able to infuse weapons and makes you unlock the mechanic felt like such a great detail to me. There's even an explanation for you getting better gear and the enemies getting harder as the game goes on. And this actually feels novel because a lot of us just take these things for granted. Having in universe explanations for why these things are possible is fantastic. Now, let's talk about the gunplay. The guns felt great in this game, and there's a decent variety from pistols to machine guns to shotguns. The firearms felt unique, and since I'm playing on the PS5, I'll credit this to the DualSense controller. The haptics and adaptive triggers gave each weapon such a distinct feel that if you were to blindfold me and hand me the controller, I'd probably be able to tell which gun I was holding simply from the way the controller felt. I do have a major gripe though. There's an absolute lack of sniper rifles in this game, and the one you do get, whose name I won't even attempt to pronounce, is severely underpowered. I also don't understand why silenced weapons were so hard to come across. Sure, you have the nail gun as the primary stealth weapon, but I think it would be so much better to have a silencer weapon trinket. Maybe this would cause balancing issues, but it could be limited to specific weapon classes like pistols or the aforementioned sniper rifle. I also wish that there had been more transforming guns like the Srilak Verso and Heritage gun, but overall I was satisfied with the weapons the game presented me with. The bars or slabs in the game feel similarly great to use, and the slab upgrades can completely flip their use cases. My personal favorite slab, apart from Shift, which is downright essential, was Carnices, which is funny because I am generally a stealthy player and this bar is loud to say the least. The one I used least was Havoc. In fact, I didn't even fuse it till after I broke the loop once. But once I upgraded it, I found it to be very conducive to my eternalist rampages. One major complaint I have seen concerning the game is the broken AI. A lot of reviewers complained that the AI was dumb, but I disagree. I would say that the AI was inconsistent more than anything else. Sure, it had its dumb moments. Many enemies just fall off slopes and often just stand there and take your abuse instead of trying to flank you, and they rarely learn from the mistakes of their unfortunate mates. The inconsistency, though, comes in when you're trying to sneak around, as the AI seems to suddenly develop a sixth sense and can spot you from miles away. All this does make the game more entertaining, though. I found myself mixing up my approach a lot and experimenting due to this inconsistent AI. Mixing stealth and combat in this game makes you feel like an absolute badass, and while I don't think that the AI was meant to emulate the smarts of the average blonde teenage girl in a slasher, I think it makes the game more entertaining for sure. The game is hard for the first few loops, at least till you're able to infuse a decent slab or weapon. After that, though, the difficulty falls significantly, and unless you're doing specific runs like the no infusion run or the ghost or mostly clean hands run, you will probably have an easy time going through the main campaign. I've saved talking about the game's approach to breaking the loop for last because I'm extremely conflicted about it. Like I mentioned before, the game makes it exceedingly easy to put the pieces together and end the loop. It gives you leads that you can follow, which tell you exactly where to go and what to do to finish the game. It's not up to you to put the pieces together, and there is only one right way to break the loop. My personal theory is that this wasn't always the case, and that they initially planned for there to be more than one ways to line up the dominoes and make them fall the way that you want them to. I would blame the lack of emphasis on player choice to time constraints, but I wonder if accessibility may also have played a factor. Considering how rigorous the advertising campaign for this game was, with more trailers and teasers than were frankly necessary, I think that they wanted to target a bigger audience than they had previously, and so they had to cut down the complexity of the game significantly as they tried to approach a broader demographic. Or maybe it was designed to be that way from the start. I don't know, I'm not an underpaid developer with unreasonable working hours. I do think that this accessibility is a good thing. As much as I would like to have a game that let me figure everything out for myself and give me more choices as far as breaking the loop was concerned, the game already has a lot of things going on at once, and as it stands, it does a really good job of tutorializing everything. And increasing player autonomy may have come at the cost of player frustration being increased, considering how many things that you have to keep track of at any given moment. The way that the whole time of day thing is managed is a great example of how this game simplifies mechanics that could otherwise become cumbersome. Instead of giving you a limited amount of time to explore a region, it forces you to choose where to go and then allows you to explore at your own leisure. As someone who hates timers in video games and loves exploring in titles with compact and dense levels, I appreciate how this was handled. Overall, when it comes to gameplay mechanics, I think that the game is creative and satisfying for the most part. It wouldn't hurt to give more player choice though, and the absence of choices takes away from the immersive sim nature of the game. But it does add to its accessibility, so it's not a total loss. Like I said, it feels like I'm being told the story of an excellent whodunit rather than tying the threads together myself like a badass detective. Now let's talk about the story of Deathloop. It's complicated and involves a lot of wibbly wobbly timey-wimey stuff, so I'll try to give you a truncated version, but let's see how that goes. The game explains everything that you need to know about ending the loop in the main campaign, but there's also a trickle feed of information that you get from just exploring the locations. There's all sorts of stuff tucked into the corners of the island that adds to its lore. To give you an idea of just how convoluted this can get, there's this bunker in Freestyle Rock that can only be opened after you find some codes hidden across the different maps. Simple enough, right? Well, you need to find the locations first, which you can only do by listening to a radio program that airs in Freestyle Rock in the morning. Find the coordinates of these locations, figure out that the numbers accompanying the coordinates are the number of times that you need to press the doorbell outside these locations, then go back to the bunker and enter the codes. Not all lore fragments are this hard to find, though. In fact, most of them can be found right off or even on the beaten path. A lot of them add new dimensions to the visionaries and their relationships with each other. Following one lead in particular will tell you all that you need to know about Colt and Juliana. It turns out that Colt has quite literally been there before, since he was stuck in the time loop of the island previously, and he had a lover named Lila. Lila gave birth to Juliana, and the reason why Cole does not recognize her at first is because this happened when he was stuck in the loop. Juliana grew up, but being stuck in the loop, Cole did not age at all. It's a very weird spin on the age old story of parental issues, to be sure. Eventually, Cole broke the loop and became a part of the Eon project and came back to the island. At some point, he realized that the same day was repeating ad nauseum, and he also found out that Juliana was his daughter. This may be because he had been on the island previously, and so he could see through its effects. It's sort of up for interpretation. Regardless, he starts killing Juliana over and over again because he does not think that being stuck in this loop is any way to live. Juliana also realizes that the same day is looping, and tired of being killed by Colt, she takes matters into her own hands and starts this twisted game of cat and mouse. But this becomes worse when Colt starts to forget who he is. This presumably doesn't happen to Juliana since she is a child of the loop, but it's not clear. Colt's time bending amnesia just ends up frustrating her, but Colt continues trying to break the loop. The literal writings on the wall are fragments of Colt's now broken psyche as memories slowly come back to him. Colt eventually figures out that to break the loop, he has to kill all the visionaries in one day to depower the device that harnesses Black Reef's power. Now you, playing as Colt, have to figure out the optimal way of killing all the visionaries in one day. Once you've done that, you meet up with Juliana, and here is where you have a choice. At the end of the game, you can either choose to kill Juliana using a dueling pistol straight out of Dishonored, and then kill yourself since you are the final visionary, or you can spare her and restart the loop, continuing this father daughter duo's twisted game of hide and seek. If you do kill her and then yourself, the loop is broken, and Colt wakes up to a sky that has changed in color. Juliana comes up to Colt and uses a slap, something that should have been linked to the loop, and goes away. I think that this ending is canon because since the loop, loops forever, it only makes sense that Colt would end it at some point, particularly since he keeps forgetting why he wants to maintain it. The ending seems to have great implications for the world of Deathloop at large, because breaking the loop has thrown everyone into the future, a future where the power of the island has expanded, which makes the slabs useful even after the loop is broken. Now, this is all up for speculation, and I love the fact that so much of this game has sparked discussion and theorization on Reddit forums and whatnot. The whole game can also be seen as an allegory for loss and moving on from grief. In fact, many hypothesize that Lila did not actually die till after the loop started, and that Juliana, through her academia, is trying to find a cure for her, stuck in this literal cycle, reliving the day of her mother's death over and over again as she tries to change the outcome, which is simply impossible. The story isn't without faults. There's a lot of unclear and unexplained elements, and the ending is divisive, but I really, really like it. I also loved learning about the different visionaries, and although I would have liked to see more opportunities or ways to close the loop, I think the game does a decent job of fleshing the visionaries out through lore documents and the like. Include, I love Deathloop. I love the game, but I don't love it nearly as much as I love Dishonored. I feel like that's mostly because I expected it to play similarly to the Dishonored series while it was trying to do its own thing. Still, the silly AI can't really be excused, and neither can the weird menu glitches. But I think that the game's combat, particularly with the haptic feedback and adaptive triggers on the PlayStation, is fantastic, and the game story is just vague enough to be cerebral. I highly recommend that you give the game a chance. While the raving reviews of larger outlets may have overhyped it, I still think it's a solid experience. Now, how do you end a video? Wait, why am I back here? Oh no.